a really incredibly powerful portal between people who, for the moment, seem kind of crazy, like a lot of us in this room, aspirations that seem kind of crazy, and people who have the capacity to help them realize some of that craziness and make it real. And so I've really appreciated the space that she and her organization have held over the years. And one example of that is the idea that she's going to present to us tonight, which is, in a way, a kind of rhetorical answer to this language of universal basic income, which is, something that, an idea that is very much worth taking seriously, but that's kind of been taken up in the Silicon Valley culture with a lot of the same quality of one-stop shop solutionism, right, that we've seen play out and harm a lot of our communities in a lot of other ways. And she's offering, in contrast, a synthetic strategy for change and for addressing our problems. And I think it's a great way to begin wrapping up. So please welcome Marina.
Thank you so much. Boy, you have a lot of stamina and commitment. It's Saturday evening. It's really great that you're all here, and thank you, Nathan and Trebor, for inviting me to be one of the closers. How many people wake up every day and open whatever portal? I love that you call this a portal. Whatever portal you use for news and just go within 5 minutes, like you feel like your blood is boiling, right? Yeah, I think that's like, I'm working on that, but that's kind of the state we find ourselves, including that story with Gothamist and DNA and all closing that paper. But of course, I'm tracking what's happening with income inequality and with future of work. And here's the little bit that kind of made my blood boil. And it comes from the Institute for Policy Studies, and they started their paper by noting that America's 20 wealthiest people, a group that can fit on a single Gulfstream jet, now so they deserve that kind of money, and they worked really hard, and they're really, really smart. They really should see a psychiatrist if they think that they're owed that or deserve that. So, of course, since Occupy, we've been talking about income inequality, and it's in every paper, it's all over the news, we all know about it. But increasingly, I think we need to shift the conversation, because really, if you think about it, income inequality is a symptom. It's a symptom of a deeper inequality that we need to start talking about, which is an asset and wealth inequality. And assets are things, they're resources that we use that allow us to generate incomes. So, of course, work and jobs is one way to generate incomes, but increasingly, and we heard it a lot throughout these 2 days from Joseph and others, this is not the primary driver of wealth anymore. It's not. Wages has been stagnant, and they're a decreasing part of the wealth that we're creating in terms of the GDP. The much larger part of wealth is being created through ownership of various kinds of assets, whether they're equity, stock ownership of various companies, things like land. All of these things are the kind of assets that generate wealth and incomes for these people. I'm sure that the 20 people who can fit on the Gulfstream didn't earn that money through working hard and from their wages. So increasingly, we need to move the conversation from income inequality to the underlying cause of it, which is the asset and wealth inequality. So, and this is something that, of course, I only got to page 500 in Piketty's book, but I think I got the message. I hope you did too. But this is from a more recent paper that he wrote with some colleagues at UC Berkeley, where they're basically saying very similar things. They're saying that in light of this massive inequality and the really lack of resources at the bottom end of the economic ladder, really discussions about global inequality should focus on how to equalize the distribution of primary assets, including human capital, financial capital, bargaining power, all the things that we were talking about. Palak and Michelle Miller talked about bargaining power, and rather than redistribution of taxes and transfers. And so in our work, then, we were looking a lot at that and what's happening with the economy and sources of wealth, and also looking at a lot at what's happening with work and jobs. And kind of, we think we're going through a really fundamental transformation in what work is and what jobs are. And it's driven somewhat by technology. It can be shaped, but you can't put these technologies back in the box. They are transforming kind of the way we create and produce things. And in many ways, historically, that has been the case, that work and the way we work is very much a product of the technology and social and cultural infrastructure that surrounds it. So we are going through this transformation that's very fundamental, and that kind of caused us and led us to create this framework that we call Universal Basic Assets. And you can read more about it on our website. You can download this map. All of those things are available. So the idea is to really, there's twofold kind of goal in this framework. One is to map out what are the core resources that people will need to live well today and in the future. All kinds of resources that will basically be the foundations for building incomes today and in the future. And the other purpose of this is to really help identify what are the levers, what are the tools, what are the policies that we can put in place to help people generate, to increase access to assets, to make assets more distributive, to various kinds of efforts that can do that. And this map sort of maps out some of the efforts that all of you are doing in this room, and co-ops fall very much into this domain. But to start with, and to kind of make the conversation about assets more comprehensive, we actually identified 3 different classes of assets that you need to think about it if you think about building them out and distributing them and policies and tools, all of those things. So let me talk through some of them. First, of course, there's private resources and assets. These are things that we own individually. To me, the notion of universal basic income very much falls into that category. Yes, it provides certain security, certain economic security, but there are other things and there are other levers that we could be using. For example, there's IDA individual development accounts. They're created for children at birth that you can access for education and other things. There's retirement accounts. There are all kinds of things. There's baby bonds and all kinds of things that can be done. But this is relating to private assets and generation of these private assets that are important. The other class of assets that are equally important, and we don't want to forget in all of our conversations, are public assets, because access to these public assets often minimizes the need for private assets. So if you compare a child born to a relatively poor family in Denmark, or the bottom 5th percentile of economic ladder, that child has about the same chance of reaching the top of the economic ladder as a child who is born to the top. If you take a child in Memphis, Tennessee, at the bottom end of the economic ladder, the chance of that child reaching the top, guess what? 3%, under 3%. So, and the reason is because in a place like Denmark, you have a lot of public resources. I mean, there are a lot of cultural reasons, I'm sure, too, but you have access to public education, you have access to health care, you have access to public transportation, which minimizes the need for private transportation. So as we're thinking about these things, we should be thinking, I was really glad to be in a conversation about all the municipal efforts that are taking place to create municipal level infrastructure. San Francisco, it was incredible to find out in the session I was in, I found out that 30% of rural families have no access to the internet. Well, that's kind of shocking. But it's even more shocking that in San Francisco, 12% of people have no access to the internet. And that's at the heart of Silicon Valley. This is where all technologies are being created, or a lot of them. So it's exciting to see that in the city, we're very close to creating a municipally owned fiber network that will provide access to the internet for all people who live in San Francisco and in the area. So lots of things that can be done with these public resources, creating public resources, particularly at municipal level, but in many other areas as well. And finally, there is I think these are newer kind of resources. We call them open resources, open assets. These are the kind of things that are not managed by the government. They're created by various kinds of communities, but they become open to everybody. So think about Wikipedia. Think about, I'm involved with a group of investigative journalists who are using these data repositories and resources to conduct global investigations of crime and corruption. There are all kinds of resources that are being created kind of in this open domain. And I think this is a big battleground because basically data is one of those resources that's being privatized today. We talked a lot about companies that use our data and creating multi-billion-dollar businesses. And I think it's something that's really important because these kinds of resources, data, AI tools, all of these things will become increasingly important as generators of income for us in the future. They are the battleground that we haven't lost, and we need to increasingly think about how we create those resources. So in terms of, I was listening a lot to various conversations and connecting it to these notions of universal basic assets. And to me, it seems like personally where I see kind of three directions that I would like to take these conversations and actions. One is that, first of all, I don't think there is a silver bullet to where we are right now. I think it takes a lot of different efforts and the kind of things you're doing. So I don't see co-ops by themselves as a whole solution. I think there's a lot of things that need to take place and are possible. I think there are we're living in a kind of mono-economic culture where we talk about zebras, not unicorns. We have way too many unicorns, and we need to sort of map out the whole variety of economic models and economic organizations that we could be creating. Sometimes we need to go back in our own history and bring them back. Remember that mutual benefit societies were very important for immigrant communities. So really thinking and enlarging the conversation about the economic forms that we need to be creating. But these zebras need access to capital. One of those things that we found out as we were doing and we're thinking about universal basic assets is a lot of these non-traditional, non-unicorns have no access to capital. There is a huge gap. So how can we create more tools to access capital? And I like what Joseph was saying. If you're reading Paradise Papers, there are over 100 universities whose endowments are invested in various tax shelters overseas. There are a lot of other public organizations that are keeping those money overseas sheltered. So we need to be thinking about what can we leverage and how can we leverage those kind of resources, whether they're endowments, public money, or its foundation, its impact funds, leverage them to create more distributive types of ventures, not uniform ventures. And the other theme that kind of stood out for me throughout the 2 days is about narratives. Creating new stories. In my field, in futures work, we always say there are no facts about the future, there are only fiction. And so we need to be creating new narratives. It occurred to me yesterday as we had the panel that we're using these terms like community when we refer to Facebook. Is it really a community? What is that we created? We need to create, like, what is it to describe what it is? But it certainly is not a community. Social, part of our social fabric. Are they really part of our social fabric? Do we want to use those terms? So we need to be creating new kinds of fiction. And as a futurist, one thing, I don't know how many of you read Yuval Harari's book, Sapiens, but there's something very hopeful about that book. He asked the question, what is it that's unique about us as Homo sapiens, as human beings, that distinguishes from other species? And the one thing that distinguishes us is this ability to create new fiction. And when old fiction and old stories don't work, I think we need to be actively creating this new fiction. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Marina. Fantastic. And I think what we want to do very briefly is hear back from the unconference sessions, and then really just for, so, you know, I know you are tired and like, I know it's been a long day, but let's not just, let's hear what people actually discussed. Briefly, really just like 2 minutes each, right? And then let's have some feedback on the whole event and close it, okay? So that we can all go out and get, you know, lubricants. Social lubricants, I should say. Okay. That didn't go down well, did it? So, okay, I'll be trying. All right, so let's hear it. So, which from these unconference sessions, like, do you have a person in each group that's perhaps comfortable to just quickly step up without great preparation, just say a few words about what you discussed and sort of bring it to the larger group? Yeah? And Nathan is so kind to run the mic around, he said. He's running already. Okay. Faster, Nathan, faster. Yeah.
Hey folks, we had the 2 sessions put together. One was the Uberization concept of disrupting the corporate sharing economy. The other was how cities can help platform co-ops. And we really enjoyed that these 2 were kind of put together because, at least in our approach with Arcade City, with this driver co-op in Austin, like our approach has been very kind of seeing the city as more of a negative force that does not understand the new model and is cracking down on us because they want to treat us like Uber, which we're not. And you had our other speaker just was very eloquently talking about all the amazing things that Barcelona has been doing and how 9% of their economy is in this platform co-op space and all of the different ways that, you know, different groups are currently and need to in other cities engage with their localities on just different strategies like that. And we just kind of ended the conference on the note that, like, hey, wow, like there's a big need to work within the system, and there's also a need and an opportunity to work outside the system. There's a concept called Voice and Exit. There's a conference, by the way, in May in Austin called Voice and Exit. Please come to that. It's awesome. But, you know, to the extent that there's potentially a glass ceiling, was one concept we talked about as kind of preventing the rise of platform co-ops, and like it's hard. There's structural reasons why it's hard for them to take root in like established systems dominated by corporations and governments. You know, there are people that we want to like hammer that from the inside, but everyone always has a moral right to leave the building, create our own TP or whatever we want outside the system, and do things that way without permission. So both approaches are needed. Thank you.
I can also bring the mic to people on this side of the... Okay, Sasha.
Sure. So we had a session on collaborative design of platform cooperatives, and we had small group breakouts. So and then report back. So I won't be able to do the best job of summarizing like everything that happened across all the small groups. But some of the key things that came up were, I noticed there was a real hunger in the room. There were a number of people who are designers, currently working as UX designers or developers in private sector firms, and were really, really frustrated by the way that some of the techniques of participatory design and user-centered design are being used in the private sector as an extractive tool to get ideas to then sell things back to people. And these were folks in the room who wanted to use their skills in another kind of way. So there's a lot of excitement and hunger, I think, to figure out how can we provide pathways to move people who are talented designers over into the cooperative movement, into the platform co-op movement. So we talked about some of the existing sort of worker-owned tech design firms that are working in that space, many of which have been sort of presenting here, but some of which haven't been as present in platform co-op. So we should really also reach out to sort of radical tech co-ops and folks like May 1st and People Link and Rise Up and Kumbit, and there's a whole sort of global network of these type of orgs, and we could really make better connections with them, both to build the platform co-ops that we need through existing worker-owned tech co-ops, and also to provide jobs and pathways to younger designers who are hungry to work in a different kind of way. We also had a bunch of conversations just about sort of like nuts and bolts and very concrete and basic suggestions for, well, how do you actually build platform co-ops in a way that isn't top down? So the old style of software development, which is known as waterfall, where you come up with a 20-page or 50-page or 100-page brief of requirements and features that you really want to build, and you need to raise $1 million before you can start doing anything, and to abandon that model and instead use pretty standard techniques from the broader software industry now around agile development, where what you really do is you gather the users together, including the workers on your co-op, but potentially also the clients, the people who are going to be purchasing goods and services, and maybe administrators, and identifying some of those other roles, coming up with those user stories in plain English language, in plain whatever language you're using, on small cards that are human understandable, and then prioritizing those together and building minimum viable platforms that solve those top couple of user stories, and then sort of building as you go. You don't need $1 million to do that. You need a little bit of time and energy from people. And then so those were some of the things that we talked about, and that's probably 2 minutes. Yeah.
So we had a triple threat in our unconference session. We had me speaking from Holochain. We had another couple of gentlemen speaking from Hexalina. Is that how I pronounce it? And then we had David speaking on trust and sort of more philosophical approach to all of this. So a little bit of background. I'll start with Hexalina. I feel like I'm getting some feedback. They've set up a blockchain-based approach for allowing platform cooperatives to quickly and easily deal with blockchain-style accounting, for valuation, for recognition of value creation, and those sorts of things without having to become experts in blockchain. So they've set up a handful of APIs, application programming interfaces, that make it easier for you to step in and go, oh, we could do this and this and this, and you don't have to actually understand all the tech. So they're basically providing a service layer offering to platform cooperatives. I spoke a fair bit about Holochain. Holochain is our alternative to blockchain technology. I won't go into all the details about how it works, but I will sort of give our why. We were really focused on trying to, as somebody mentioned just a minute ago, to put the individual in the center. So rather than having the network become the holder of record and coherence and where all the rules live, we want it to stay with the individuals. I won't go into the details there, but I will say people talk a lot about privacy and security when they speak about these new distributed technologies. And I think it's really easy to sell privacy and security because we experience pain today by seeing these failures of privacy, of data being gobbled by monopolies, of breaches like Equifax, et cetera. It's easy for us to sell something because there's a pain already being experienced personally by people in the room. But that's not usually what's driving the folks who are really excited about this. It's not the, oh, we could make some pain go away. It's, oh, there's a promise of a better world. But it's hard to make that promise visible because it's not yet being experienced. You can't see it. And so my way of describing this is, we used to have maps in the back of our car. They were paper maps. They were maybe a 3-ring binder kind of thing. And if somebody asked you, do you have a mapping problem? You go, no, I pull out the map and I go and look up where I'm supposed to go, and then I get I find my way to that place. But it was very different when somebody put that map on a smartphone and put us in the middle of it. When Google Maps first showed up, that was the killer application that drove smartphone adoption. People suddenly found themselves in the middle of the map, and it told them every step of the way how to get there. And that's very different from having a paper map, right? It was so different that people were like, wow, I can't imagine not having this. Well, our hope is that that's what the internet becomes like. Right now, we go to an application, and then we go to another application, we come back. We go to another application, we come back. And the applications are at the center, and every one of those is trying to addict us and distract us and pull us into their space. And the hope is we put the user at the center, and that user is able to pull the other pieces back to them, and they're able to make them work in ways that work for that individual. So I'll leave it with that. Thank you. Oh, wait, one last thing. We had lots of really amazing and maybe overly complex talks about trust and the intricacies of trust and identity and how social communities can coordinate without end up having to give up all of your agency as well. Thank you.
Who to report from?
We were part of the unconference session about consensus and about finding a solution without complete consensus. And what we kind of focused on was making sure that there's a place where people can physically put their grievances and awarenesses of what is happening within the community. And then attempting to have experience-based solutions to those. So solutions that you can try out for a week, and then after a week, you look at whether it's solving the problem or not, or just having spaces where an awareness can stay up there. And one that was brought up was making invisible people visible, and how that could just stay in the awareness section, so that every time you had a conference about the culture of the community, that would be on the table, and it could be conversed, and it's a physical space where we can acknowledge the existence of what we hope to create in our culture.
There were 2 more, right, Nathan?
Can't count.
Well,
A group of us had a conversation about terms of service in Twitter. It was cool.
my favorite summary. Great. So now to the really serious part of the evening. This is when you sort of bring in your reflections and feedback or thoughts, maybe where to go next, right? And I think many of you talked over coffee and maybe had ideas for projects to work on. That's certainly what I spend a lot of my time on. And so maybe this is a moment maybe to say a little bit about what you took away and maybe what your plans are until we meet again. Yeah. We didn't even have to wait for the uncomfortable silence.
I just wanted maybe to get a little bit more detail about the event tomorrow.
Does anybody, would anybody like to represent that? Anybody who can?
Handing over to Danny Spitzberg.
I'm going to hand it over to Mackenzie because too many dudes on the mic.
Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. Hey, my name is Mackenzie, and I'm with CoLab Cooperative from Ithaca. Danny's repping us from Oakland. And tomorrow at Civic Hall, we're going to be hosting an after party, sort of a developer jam session, so to speak, where we hope to put a lot of ideas about building platform cooperatives and the tools necessary for them to succeed into action. So we'll have some brainstorming sessions. We hope people will bring stories of success and challenges that we can incorporate into how we're planning platform cooperatives for the future. And it's from 11 to 4, and it's a free event. We'll have coffee and snacks. And if you have any questions, please find me or Danny. We'll stick around for a few minutes. Civic Hall, co-working space, which is just around the corner.
So, who wants to be next? We are taught to wait for 4 minutes of uncomfortable silence until somebody. Okay, so anonymous.
Hi, my name is Amina Rose. This is more of a shameless ask for help. I'm writing a senior thesis about how cooperatives could be a tool for community building across membership that is diverse, specifically in terms of race and class. So if there's anyone who might have resources with regard to that kind of community building and specifically strategies for co-ops that have diverse membership to build trust and that kind of relationships, I would love to talk to you, please. My email address is arsimon, ARSIMON, at princeton.edu, princeton.edu. Thank you, sorry.
Uncomfortable silence is not good, so, yeah. So I have actually, well, my name is Tessa, and first of all, I want to thank everybody, and I want to thank Marina, and the conference was amazing. And I have a hunger, a thought that was on my mind as everything was happening, like a question of gratitude and legacy, because a lot of the things that were discussed, they were not necessarily new. I mean, they were tribal cultures, they were all those things, and some people know more about it, some people know less about it. But a question of looking at the legacy of what people have done in all those areas and using it as opposed to just inventing, and everybody likes the creative process of inventing something new, but I guess my question or my hunger is innovation versus gratitude and legacy. So, food for thought or question, or anybody wants to say anything about that?
Oh, you do? No, okay, sure. Okay. There was, okay, Maya.
Hello, I'm Maya Fuster from Barcelona. First, thank you everybody for these 2 days of exchange. I want to transmit you that it's important what the cities can actually do in terms of public policies for promoting platform cooperativism. And in this sense, from Barcelona and Barcelona City Council, we are trying to promote a network of cities who are exchanging the type of policies that they are doing and the things that might work to promote this type of economy. So I would like to ask you 2 things. One thing is that if you have contacts with your city council and you know about programs that they already are running, please let me know, because we are trying to map current policies. And second, I would like to suggest, on the basis of the experience of Barcelona, to get to organize the ecosystem of platform cooperatives in your city. Because actually, many times the city councils and the administration don't have the expertise about how to actually promote platform cooperatives. So it's important that you create this ecosystem in order to build an interface to transmit the type of things that might be useful for you to do from the administration. And also, it might be also very useful, here in the base of Barcelona, in order to create a social market between the different cooperatives and platform cooperatives in the city. So just this, as simple as it sounds.
Hi, I'm Teresa and I'm from South Africa. I'm a Uber driver and organizer for Uber drivers. So I think that there's so many interesting people here and we haven't really had much time to network and, you know, just seeing someone's name, like, if you're lucky, you don't really get to know much about what they are, what they do. So I'd like to suggest that maybe there's an online forum that maybe has everyone's contact details. I think, you know, most of us don't know how to get hold of anyone else. So if, you know, to have contact details and, you know, some way of following up with the network.
So you can join the others by joining the discussion list or the newsletter that is already in existence that also has the people from the previous events on it. So we can solve that problem.
I want to give a deep sense of thanks and gratitude to the organizers of this conference. I've had a wonderful time, and I'm so grateful too that it was affordable and accessible. That made a big difference in my participation. So I want to shout that out. That's a big thing. My name is Caroline, for those of you who don't know me. I'm a co-op entrepreneur with a platform co-op called Cosmos.coop. And I really appreciated all of the information that I received and the networking I received through this weekend, and especially all the many showcases. We heard a lot of presentations from people with discrete projects and problems that they're trying to solve through using platform cooperativism. And to piggyback off of Teresa's comment, actually, I'd like us to explore, you know, maybe opportunities for weaving together some of these things and identifying the fruitful overlap in our work, and kind of moving into that stage of the discourse of really exploring how could we be more effective and efficient if we cooperate among ourselves. And so just I think what I want to kind of raise or ask or kind of put forth to look to the future is how can we focus on spreading not just technologies that are cooperative or that facilitate cooperation, but spreading cooperative technologies themselves, spreading cooperative practices, cooperative methods. I think that that's equally as important. And I have a developer background as a cooperative developer, and I'm just learning about the tech side, but I think tech has this potential to weave together people in these profound ways. And so that's exhilarating for me to begin discovering this side of it. But it goes both ways. Like, you know, we can weave together ourselves on a variety of scales, not just technological in nature. So thank you.
Getting my work out here. Okay, so then you remember how Palak did this amazing, launch of this event. You remember her 3 Ps? Who remembers her 3 Ps? Hear that, listen to that, right? Again. Good. Okay, so now comes the second part where she's closing the whole thing, and I'm sure she has something amazing prepared for us.
That's the 4th P, right? Pressure. No. So we obviously want to wrap up. So thank you everybody for staying. Thank you for coming and staying present, the 5th P, the whole time. I did want to return to those 3 themes and kind of refine them just a little bit in terms of, I think, the discussion that we had. And so if we start with purpose, there were a lot of really important comments and really thoughtful ideas that really emerged over the course of the 2 days that we had together. And for me, I just kept thinking about, through all the different presentations, whose problems are we really solving? And how are we deciding which problems to solve? There seems to be a running theme about that as we're thinking about our purpose as a growing movement in the 6th P, the platform movement. So I want to, really pull out some of these, questions that are going to be unresolved for now. But will be resolved through the work as we actually begin to build the models and grow this movement. So in terms of purpose, whose problems are we solving? Who gets to decide which problems we're solving? And in some ways, there seemed to be some questioning throughout the sessions around distinguishing between platform cooperatives as a presumed solution versus interrogating the problem that we're actually trying to solve. I mean, there's no doubt that there's a role for platform cooperativism as solutions in the world, but really thinking about what purpose and what problem you're solving and then figuring out how it relates to that. The 2nd P, power. I was really moved by Alicia's comment last night, and I think many of us were talking about it afterward, and her powerful observation that ownership doesn't automatically solve or necessarily solve the problems of other axes of power. Let me say that again. Ownership doesn't necessarily solve the problems of other axes of power. And the context of that was not to abandon the idea of ownership in any way, but it was to say what else doesn't get solved by that alone. And in our user design session earlier, Sasha had talked about the matrix of domination and a number of different ways in which we are ideas around race or gender or all kinds of ways in which we're not allowed to be or we are not our full selves. Thinking about how what we're building is addressing, what gets solved by the models that we're discussing here today and what doesn't. And that's all fundamentally about power. And then lastly, people. I think there was a really good conversation last night on the plenary. I think obviously everyone's here because we're concerned about people. And that in that process, design really matters. It really matters. The process really matters. And which people are benefiting from this growing movement. Not just the models that we're building, but which people are benefiting from this movement. Juliet asked a really important question at the end of her presentation when she said, and it was such a wonderful presentation that allowed for us to get under the hood of how a model can actually work. But she did end that presentation with an important question around, can this model actually be applied to low-income people or people who've been on the margins or invisible in the economy? It's a really important question, and to think about which people are going to be benefiting. So we have our work cut out for us. I know we're going to see each other next year at this conference, and I hope that over the course of the year, we're making progress on really interrogating these questions in the way that we're doing our work. And as you dig into actually doing the work, that's the only way we'll begin to have some level of resolution. We can talk about everything to death, but we actually won't make progress until we dig in and actually try. Before we close, again, we want to extend our deepest gratitude and thanks to all of the sponsors of this. It's really important that the space was affordable and accessible, and that definitely would not have been possible without our sponsors. And of course, some of the sponsors are very large co-ops, and so they're both ideologically and pragmatically lifting up this community of people. But most of all, we want to say thank you in closing to you. I mean, this movement is going to be made up of you. Every movement starts with a group of people, and that's this group of people. It's this group of people that's imagining a new way, a new economy, a new future, not just for us and not just for the people around us, but in ways that are really, really transformative. This set of ideas has the potential to transform the future of the economy. And the future of the economy affects every single person on this planet. And so don't doubt for a second that you have an important role in really thinking about how we can transform this planet to be something where every single person is truly valued. Thank you and have a great evening.